installing CentOS. Well, we've made it to week 3, and if you check under Blackboard, you'll see we have the first of our CSEC labs that are performed in our virtual lab environment. This week's installing the operating system. This lab will be performed from vDirector, and I'm sitting here in a logged in vDirector section looking at all of my Linux virtual machines. If you have any questions about how to get here, be sure to check the video on VPN instructions and vDirector instructions. So in front of me here, we see several CentOS machines. Now, I teach several classes, so I have multiple machines. You should have 2. You should have a CentOS 1 and a CentOS 2, because we'll be using 2 VMs over the course of the semester. If I right-click on the console, we'll see there's not a whole lot of options we can do yet. The machines currently are powered off. And just like a physical machine, a virtual machine must be powered on before I can do anything with it. And I will click on the power on button. Now as this machine's coming up, we'll see the powering on symbol here. And in a few seconds, we should enter a powered on state. If you click on the console, at this point, we should have a console pop out. Now, what am I looking at here? I'm looking at a boot screen that basically says, no operating system found. Well, yes, these machines are blank. That was the whole idea. So we are going to install an operating system onto this unconfigured VM. Well, just like in the physical world, to install an OS, I need to have installation media. And we'll be using the virtual equivalent of a CD or a DVD disc. Right-click back on the console, and about halfway down, you're going to see a entry here for Insert DVD CD from Catalog. Go ahead and click on that. Every vDirector classroom, this virtual classroom, has a certain number of disk images called ISO files kept in a catalog. And by accessing this catalog, this is the equivalent of taking a CD and placing it in a PC's CD drive. Now, you should see a couple of CentOS ISOs, right? And remember, ISOs are disk images. This is nothing but an installation disk in file form. And vDirector, being a virtual environment, can read it just like it was a physical disk. You should have a CentOS 6.6 and a CentOS 7. In this lab, you want to select 7. Click on it, make sure the selected media says CentOS 7, and click Insert. vDirector shows us being busy as it mounts that virtual CD. And if we go back to our console, we're still sitting here at a operating system not found. We need to reboot this VM. Easiest way, these little buttons right up here, these little VCR buttons. Play, pause, stop, and this one right here, reset. This is the equivalent of hitting a reset button on the front of a physical PC. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll give it a minute while it goes through and reboots. And we're sitting right here now, as it comes back up, at a CentOS installation screen. At this point, there is no mouse support enabled for this environment, so you're going to have to click inside of it. And then use your arrow buttons to move up and down amongst your choices. Now, don't worry about testing this media. If this were a physical CD, yes, we'd want to test it to make sure that it didn't have any scratches on it or was unreadable in some way. This is a file, so it's going to be readable. So go ahead and highlight Install CentOS and hit Enter on your keyboard. And then, when prompted, hit Enter again. What you're seeing right now is something called Anaconda, the Linux installer being loaded into RAM on the VM. And here we are. We are looking at the Linux installation screen. If you ever installed OSs before, it looks a lot like a Windows installation and really proceeds much the same way. start by picking your language. Now at this point we do have mouse support, so go ahead and click around. Next place, it's asking for a bunch of locality information. So a lot of this is already correct. It's already showing date and time as New York time zone, which here in the Eastern Standard Time, that's what we're in. It's showing an English keyboard and an English language support. And if you scroll down a little bit, it's showing some other choices here. Now here's where we go in and start selecting things. The installation source will indeed be local media. Right? There are other choices. You can install Linux off of a network if you wish. In our case, though, we're doing it directly from an installation CD. Now down here, I've got an orange explanation mark. No disk selected. That can't be good. What it's asking us is, what hard disk do you wish to install Linux on? Now, your VM actually has 4 virtual hard disks. 3 of them are only a gig in size, and 1 of them is 20 gig. Well, 20 gig is the one that's going to be our system drive. This is where you're going to install the OS to. These other 3 1 gig drives are used for labs later on. Click on the 20 gig drive. It'll be SDA, and click Done. Now, the next piece. What software are we actually going to install? Remember, Linux is extremely modular. By default, it has us doing a minimal install. Well, minimal install is very minimal. In fact, it won't even give you a GUI. We do want to start out with having a GUI on there. So let's click here. And here's all our different choices, right? Minimal install, infrastructure server, file and print server, basic web server. These are just pre-built environments that for different purposes. So if we were setting this up as a web server, we might select this and it'll just install the pieces that help host web pages. In our case, I want you to select the GNOME desktop. Right? Now this enables a bunch of other functionality. And if you scroll down, we're going to see some of these other pieces. And really, if you want to go ahead and add the GNOME applications, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Let's go ahead and do that. CentOS does come with an office suite, a free office suite called LibreOffice. If you wanted to install that, you could. For this lab, not strictly required. And click Done. Now it's asking us. We can either quit out or begin the installation. Once we begin the installation, that's it. We're committed. So let's go ahead and do that. And we can see right here this little progress bar as it goes through and starts installing the OS. Now those modules, those little pieces that make up Linux are called packages. And it's what it's actually doing is going through and creating package after package, or installing rather, package after package. Now there's a couple things here it's squawking about. The first thing it's saying is, hey, you didn't set your root password. Well, under Linux, root is the administrative user. We probably should. Let's go ahead and do that. And in this, set it to whatever you wish. I suggest using the password, which is uppercase P, the @ symbol, SSW0RD. Explanation mark. It may complain about it because it's saying this is a weak password, but let's see what happens. Whatever password you pick, make sure you write it down. Normally we don't write down passwords, but if you don't remember this password, you're going to have to reinstall the OS again from scratch because there is no viable method at this point in our course to recover it. Click Done and click Done again because it says it's weak. And here we go. Right now we only have one user on the system, which is root, and that's fine. We don't care. Later we'll add users. And as you can see, installation is booking right along. Right, we're up to about 550 of almost 1,300 packages. I'm going to pause recording here while the rest of this installs, and I'll join you once the package installation is complete. And we're back. We're here at the end of our installation process. Our progress bar has gone all the way to the right, and really the system is now just waiting for us to reboot it. So go ahead and click the reboot button. And we're going to watch the system go down and come back up. Now, the very first thing we see is the Linux boot sequence. And we're going to go through and watch all the various modules come online. And it's saying, hey, we didn't finish something. License information not accepted. Well, we should probably accept it. And this is just a standard EULA. I mean, basically it says that CentOS 7 comes with no guarantees, use at your own risk. Sure, we accept that. And click the Done button. If I expand this out a bit, we can see we have a Finish Configuration button. Now, you're going to get a screen asking about kdump. Kdump is just a tool used for kernel crashes, or when the system blue screens, the Linux equivalent of a blue screen. Just go ahead and leave the default settings and click the forward button. Verifying again our language. Go ahead and click Next. Now, at this point, it's going to force us to create a user. I'm going to create just a user called Bob. And Bob's password will be the password. Now, the system may not accept the password because it thinks it's too weak. Let's see if it actually allows us to do that. And it took it. Again, checking for our locality. Here we are in the New York time zone. And with that, we should say Linux desktop. Here we go. And notice we're logged in as Bob right here. Okay? Which is fine for right now. Now, it starts with this little getting started thing. You can go ahead and close that off. Here, sitting, looking at the GNOME desktop. I'll see you next lecture.